All right. Well, I would like to welcome everyone to the D&D Writing panel for the Story Valley Writing Conference. Um, my name is Pyro. That's what I go by, and it is a pleasure to have everyone here today. I guess first off, we're going to start by having everyone introduce themselves. I'm sure everyone has a little bit of familiarity with Dungeons and Dragons being probably a tabletop game favorite for everyone. But we'll go ahead and we'll start with Steve to introduce himself.
Oh, I'm first? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll go you first.
Hi, Steve. I've been a DM for about 8 years. I did 3.5, 3.5, 4, 5 cipher system, and I have in the process of trying to figure out my own D20 and or resource system. It's getting a little complicated. So I'm happy to be here. Do I just pass it on to someone else, I guess?
Yeah, and would you like to go next, Annie Cupcake or Ellie, whichever you want to go by?
You can call me Elle, you can call me Ani. Either's fine. I have 6 years of experience playing D&D, 2 years DMing. I've only really ever played 5e, but I've recently acquired the source books for GURPS and for AD&D, so I am looking more into those rule sets, talking with my regular group about possibly running a game there, so that's exciting. And my my new main group, I should say, my other group, we just recently had to dissolve due to scheduling conflicts. So but
Thank you.
yeah.
And then Laura Weaver. Sorry, actually, Laura Weaver, would you like to go next?
Hello there. I am the Traveling Lore Weaver. I have been DMing for about 3 or 4 years now. I've been running text campaign for about 6 to 8 months, featuring 3 of my friends. And I have been running a voice chat campaign for just over a year, but we had to dissolve due to so many players being unable to play. So, I'm about to start another text campaign with a total of 8 players, which is the max I can allow at my table.
It is scary.
I know. All right. I'm also a writer. Been working on so many manuscripts, and I've been trying to transcribe many of my players' adventures into written format.
That's what I'm doing with my current book. It's our campaign that just dissolved.
All right. So we'll start off with, we have 2 segments to this panel. To kind of start off with, we had a couple people split into each of the panels, with Prince of Hell not being here. I'm sure that we can fill in where is needed, but to kind of start it off, our segment 1 will be campaign writing, which kind of tends to be the heart and the core of all D&D games. And then a few of these ideas that we came across that were kind of, I think, common questions are, what type of games do you want to run? Where to start with writing, including players' backstories and arches. And those will be the first few questions we'll touch on to this first part.
All right. Well, I guess that's where I start.
Mhm.
Alrighty. So, what type of game do you want to run? Lately, I've been making sure to send my players consent forms and questionnaires to kind of get a feel of what kind of story they want to immerse themselves in. And like what kind of either an epic or a cozy story, if they want to go on long, far distant medieval lands, or something more steampunk. It's really up to the players, and so I just take their prompts and build something out of that. It's D&D is a cooperative game. It's not just my story. It is our story. And I learned that through trial and error, sometimes by button heads with one of my players. And, I just made sure to change my mindset. It is our story. And therefore, I need to make it revolve around these characters and fit it all in to their, like, not only just fit it into their box, but break the box open so that they can enjoy themselves as well as make sure everybody else is enjoying themselves. With the writing, yes.
As I say, I take a bit of a different approach with mine. I will go to them before I even have my session 0, and I'll be like, okay, here are 3 different possibilities for a campaign. I'm willing to run either, this type of, a more sword and sorcery dungeon crawl type campaign, or I'm willing to run a kind of political intrigue or a this or that. Give them like 3 options, and then which would you all rather do, and then go from there. That way there's not 4 or 5 different players and they want to do 4 or 5 different things.
Right. And the way since I run multiple campaigns on my Discord channel, I group them together. If they want something cozy, I group the cozy players together. If they want something epic, I group the epics together. 9 times out of 10, though, they want epic, and so the ones that want cozy, I make sure to give them a one-on-one campaign if they so choose.
That's a lot.
Yeah, well,
I can run one game at a time.
That's not a bad thing. So don't shortchange yourself if someone can do multiple campaigns at the same time or multiple one-shots versus someone who can only do one at a time. Doesn't mean you're inferior. That's just how you work. Don't hurt yourself over it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm weird.
Yes.
I am absolutely weird, and I embrace the weird.
I know players who can only play in one game at a time, and I could play in, tons. So.
Well, DMing multiple games, props to you. I don't know if I can handle that.
It's a lot of work.
That was a good start of as you said, it's not just, your story, it's everyone's kind of story in that. Another thing to touch upon is ending a campaign. Sometimes every campaign will soon have an end. I think this will be a little bigger one to touch on. If you do want to talk a little bit more about that, Laura Weaver. I just said where you run multiple, I'm sure you have a little bit of experience with this.
Not that have come to a natural conclusion. The voice chat, the one I've been running the longest, we just dissolved because so many players just had to stop. So we had to kind of decide to end it completely. And so we were only level 4, and I had planned, key events to get them to level 20 to take on this big bad. So we never got to reach that natural conclusion that I had envisioned for the main storyline. However, for one of my text campaigns, that is a one-on-one campaign with my wife. we're taking a break now to kind of because we have so much going on in our life. But she is already at her character's already at level 12, and she's looking forward to the ending that I have planned for that, as well as shaping that ending into what is what satisfies her. But when ending a campaign, you kind of want to make sure that every character has gotten their big story arc so that, you know, they can grow not only as characters, but as people, as the players behind the characters, and make sure that they feel satisfied with how their characters progressed. And like they'll feel like they have no more regrets, as well as wrapping up any loose ends. Like maybe there was a BBEG that got away, or there was this one little mystery that wasn't they weren't able to solve that that is going to come back and bite them in the butt.
I always have my players give me a personal goal along with their backstory, and I focus on wrapping those up before I move on to the end. And we might not even, I might not even have an idea for who my big bad's going to be until we're partway through one of the arcs. Unless I'm running a module.
You know, that's a good idea. I should ask my players what kind of ending they envision for their character if their character survives long enough.
Yeah.
Or gets too old.
If.
But I think I don't know. I tend to feel most campaigns tend to fall apart before actually finishing. I think of all the years I've played D&D, I think there was one where we're getting kind of tired, so we had this big ending last battle hooray before we were able to go back home.
I did not get to the end of my very first campaign. I decided to run Ghosts of Saltmarsh. We did not get to the ending of that, but we did get to they latched on to this just throwaway little random encounter I had. We're just like, oh, what was that? So I added in a cult, and they were able to go and stop the cult was trying to bring, I can't even remember which god it was, to the material plane. So they were able to go and stop that, and it was a really satisfying ending, even though it wasn't the ending we had planned.
Yeah, sometimes the players will take your story and check it out the window and then build a story of their own, which, that's fine. I mean, sometimes what they come up with can be so much better than what the DM comes up with. I've seen so many TikToks and YouTube shorts where, the DMs just sit there and listen to their players' theories. And sometimes they're like, oh, that's better than what I came up with.
Our longest campaign, one of the reoccurring villains, our DM told me later, he didn't even expect to come back or anything. But my character, she had such a vitriolic, dude, fuck that guy reaction that he ended up coming back several times. And that's what's great about playing with other people is people never do what you expect them to. Ever.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. You can also incorporate players' little quirks into the story. Like I have a player who says "ack" whenever he's like, "Oh yeah, of course, good to know," stuff like that. And so I incorporated it into his character's speech in the manuscript adaptation of the game, and I felt that was he felt that that was a good homage to the player himself.
All right. So this next part of this first segment would be creating a character. The big three things we plan to focus on is what are their purpose, their archetype, and fleshing them out.
Okay, so with characters, you got to think of what their point, what is their purpose in the story. Are they an informant? Are they a leader? Are they just a bartender? Like what kind of relationship do they have with the other characters? For example, you could have a bartender who was childhood friends with one of the players, and so he's the guy that they come to when they need, a place to stay, or just some sneaky information that only bartenders can get through because they're unofficial therapists. These characters, you got to have some sort of connection to the players and to the world itself. It's okay to have just random people, but don't focus too much on the randoms if they're not conducive to the story. If you're, but that's also for NPCs. For if you're making like a character to go with the party, find a little niche area that could use some balancing out and balance it out with them. For example, I have had a couple of campaigns where they didn't have a healer, and so I made clerics. I had in the voice campaign that I ended. I had this short little Eric Hokra here healer who was a real motherly type. She treated everybody like they were her little chicks, and that was because she lost her children to vicious crimes committed by the queendom that she lived in. So she really embodied the fact that she was meant to be a mother and mothered the players. And with one of the text campaigns, of course, again, no healer, so I made a healer. But this time I went with this walking tank of a turtle with heavy armor. And once his strength stat got to 15, I made it so that he could carry a huge shield and also wield a iron cudgel with one hand, so that he had this AC of 20 and also could, deal big bonks. So that way he was harder to damage, and so he could stay up and keep healing the reckless players who charged into combat or ran off to get themselves in danger. So that's important, is to find out which parts of that story they need to fit into, and embracing those stereotypes and archetypes. That's fine, but also give them like little quirks, like the turtle healer. He loves to cook, so he'll cook these delicious meals, and because of that, I gave him that gourmet feat where his food can give him temporary hit points. But in the campaign I'm about to start, I have this wizard monk who, yeah, she's studious, but she was trained to also, be able to defend herself because, wizards be squishy. So she's already carrying a staff. So why not make that an actual deadly weapon for her? So if like a particularly vicious, enemy pops up on her, she can just bap. Especially if she runs out of spell slots. And her quirk is that she is addicted to notebooks. Like, she will go to a stationery shop and just be smelling the notebooks, and will spend so much gold on notebooks. And so these little quirks, that is what fleshes them out, what makes them more dimensional. because nobody wants that flat character. Nobody wants that because you can't really build. The players can't really build that connection to that character, and that goes for villains as well. You got to give them a reason, give them a backstory to as to why they're committing these crimes. You can't be like, oh, they're just evil. They do that because that's what they do. That is boring. Give them more depth. Make them a real person. So that way, like, you can love to hate them. Like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. Everybody loved to hate Cersei, and but they also kind of felt for her because of the fact that the world and her enemies just took everything from her. Her husband, her children. One by one, her children were taken from her. And so, like, what made her snap was the fact that, she's all alone in her world. Even though her brother was there, she twisted into that tyrant. And that's why people love to hate her, but also pity her. So give those characters more depth.
I think that's a good explanation on that. Depth is what's going to kind of make them stick out. Because, I mean, when we all play a D&D character, we want to be that character to the best of our ability. We want to make those choices that they would make. Which brings us to the next part, which would be NPC creation. So again, round 2, what's their purpose? Making them likable or hateable. Telling their story without stepping on your player's toes. How would we incorporate that NPC wise?
Well, what I said earlier about giving them depth and all that already covers the first 2 talking points on that. How to tell their story without stepping on your players. Get the players involved. For example, if their childhood friend is down on their luck and they have a criminal organization after them, maybe the characters could be that bigger brother or that best friend who helps them turn their life around while also protecting them. And it also, not only does it build the NPC, it also builds the character, because maybe they realize, oh, this is what my character actually would do, instead of, oh, my character is going to be selfish and not bother, because it'll ultimately build up their character instead of trampling on them. So make them connect with the players, and like make them really dig into their backstory. If there's a player who does not give you a backstory because they can't think of one, that's fine. Work with them to create one, and then help them build that in, so that they feel that their character is more fleshed out at the end.
I take most of my NPCs, I do pull from players' backstories and stuff. And I will take, if it's one that's not, I'll do all the, okay, this is, I'll have their name, their basic personality, like, oh, they're more cheerful, they're grumpy, or they're, whatever, and a small goal they might have. And then I leave it there until my players really, latch on to people, because ultimately it's easier as a DM to pour all the work into the characters that your players start to resonate with, rather than pouring that much work into every NPC and then have it be somebody that you've maybe really built up and stuff, and your players are just like, oh yeah, that guy's cool, I guess I'm gonna go talk to this guy.
A good example.
Same with villains.
A good example of this is I'm gonna if nobody's seen Vox Machina or watched any Critical Role, Taliesin Jaffe gave Matt Mercer just a bare bones backstory for his character Percival, but Matt took that backstory and made those villains of his tragedy into one of the biggest BBEGs that have lasted long past the ending of campaign 1. The Briarwoods were just supposed to be this count and countess that took over Percy's homeland and drove him out and tortured him and drove him out. But Matt took it and made it so much bigger, so that way it was not only Percy but also the rest of the team like developed this bond of hatred towards the Briarwoods. And that made so much of the difference because they're like, oh, these guys are evil. We have to stop each and every one of their plans. We're going to drop everything and stop them. I felt that
who cares? You know, they could have just said, "Oh, yeah, well, that's not my problem." That's why pulling from your players' backstories is so crucial.
Exactly. I try to, when I DM, I try to think what would Matt Mercer do, or what would Brendan Lee Mulligan or Abria Iyengar. Yes, I'm a very big Critical Role fan, but I'm also trying to get into Dimension 20. I am trying to dig into those characters' backstories that they provide me, so I can shape this world into what the players want to experience, but also just blow their minds. So I believe that's all I can say on the subject.
I'm fixing to start a campaign. I actually just did session 0 2 weekends ago, and one of my players was just like, all of them decided they wanted to play women, which I trust these people enough to know they are going to do it well. But he was just like, I want her to have this, lover that's went missing and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yes. Here's how I can tie it to these NPCs I have planned. Here's this, here's that. And it's great because I have that to build on. I have that to hook that player into, okay, well, why would they want to go to this place? Well, maybe they've heard their lovers there.
Exactly.
Why would they want to go to these people? Oh, they're her brothers, so they might know where she went.
Oh, well,
yeah.
That kind of ties us into the next section where, as you mentioned, like all your players in your games are decided to play women, and you're like, great, because they can have their own goals or whatnot, which kind of goes into communication with their players, like being, having honesty and setting boundaries with your players. Which this will be Steve and Annie will talk to us about this.
All right. Okay. So, all right. So for session 0, for any relationship specifically, you need communication, comprehension, and respect. Those are just the basic necessities for any relationship. It goes for, it extends far beyond session 0. So if you don't have any of that, there's no way you'll be able to actually effectively, we'll talk to each other and make sure, you guys know what you want and what you don't want. You have to be able to explain, ideally with detail, that what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, and what you're not too sure about, and are hopefully willing to be open to suggestions. As the DM, you are essentially the leader of the party, and you are also there you should be the first one to set the ground rules for what you allow. and then from there you would want to then go over the players' ground rules, like what are they willing to do, and from there, have a dialogue about what's okay and what you're willing to do and how far you're willing to go for either like new ideas or just our old ideas for that matter. The DM must be the one to be able to delegate whose rules you'll be following. I mean, granted, it'll be probably a mix of like what players allow and don't allow, but it's important to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Ideally, have like I would use a Google Doc and then make sure everyone is on that Google Doc and to just like update rules and such and whenever something comes up, because it'll be if it's like a campaign, for example, it's going to be a lot of different things are going to happen and keep changing as time goes on. So it'll be harder to keep. Your memory is not perfect, right? So it's easier to just make sure that everyone has the same Google Doc link, and then if problems arise, you can go over the doc and settle it from there. Hopefully, and then if there's any sort of like well, okay, so it does matter if there's like some kind of communication issue where like either party, the DM or the players, have there was some kind of miscommunication of some kind. It happens, so don't panic. It's fine. It's more so just like the ability for both of them to explain, be respectful and explain that's not what I meant. This is what I actually meant, because we're human and we're gonna make mistakes. So it's more important that you'd want go back to the main three rules, or at least the guidelines, I should say: communication, comprehension, and respect. Just make sure that you talk through it with whatever is on your mind, and hopefully either side can come to some kind of solution. If the DM cannot figure out a solution on their own, you could maybe even ask other DMs what they would do. You can also just go to Reddit, honestly, or like look up YouTube videos and such. Maybe ask friends or even family members, because it's still based on working as a team in order to make sure everyone has fun, right? So, if there are two conflicting rules, I hope say if one person outright cannot do something, then if there is actually just nothing you can do about it, then you're gonna have to side with that rule. If that still bothers with the other players, then you're gonna have to like find a way to compromise, hopefully. If not, then maybe you have to remove that player whose rule that doesn't have any wiggle room whatsoever. If you have rules where it's a kind of a gray area where people aren't really sure, like it's not an outright no, but it's in the middle, it's not a yes either, then that's at least easier to work with, because then from there you can figure out like, oh, this player wants to have these weapons, or this player wants to have this class or these classes. Or if one person's kind of like a power gamer and is worried that they don't have enough like DPS, for example, then you can there's a variety of solutions you can go from there. Mechanically speaking, if it's more so just like that person's just arrogant and doesn't think that they need their party members, you should feel free to remove that person if needed. You don't want to have people who are so jealous or would delve into whatever vices in order to hurt other people. That's where you have to step in and remove people. You've done so much to keep them together, but if there's someone who's just outright just hurting people, then you have to remove them. It sucks, it's terrible, but it's better than everyone getting hurt. So
Yeah, well, that's a good way to go about the honesty and boundaries of the games. Essentially, the goal is for everyone to have fun. When something is ruining that, you have to take action. Otherwise, the whole group falls apart.
yeah.
But goes to our next part. So, with the whole communication with your players, as Ellie talked about earlier, she had a session 0 a couple weekends ago. And what's nice about session 0 is it gives you a chance to kind of talk about the game, create the characters, and talk about the lines and the veils. If you'd like to tell us more about that, Ellie.
All right, so how I run my session 0s really depends on who I'm playing with, if it's a new group versus an established group. Obviously, I'm going to go more in depth with the new players, but I go over, okay, here are the things I consider off limits. I'm not running an evil campaign, so nobody's allowed to play an evil character, and if you do evil things, there will be consequences. Sexual assault is going to get you kicked from my, even mentions of it, going to get you kicked from my table. The exception is like if it's a minor part of a backstory that's like gives reason for, oh, I really don't like this faction because, they assaulted my mother and I'm a product of that. If it doesn't come up at the table, that's something that's more gray area, talk it out with the player. But, hey, I will not include violence against children in my campaigns. I will not, I will put a stop to if you want to go all murder hobo and be like, oh, I'm going to attack this child. No. Cut off there. And those are things that I'm just like, you don't get this is your warning about that. You don't get a reminder that, oh, that's not, because that's a hard limit there. And then I ask my players, what are some of your all's things? Now, there are some things that I'll tell them, I don't think this is a good fit for you. Like if they're just like, well, I don't like, this and this and this and this. Are really like, oh, I don't want violence at all. Okay, why are you playing D&D where it's a game where there's fighting and stuff like that? There are other systems better suited to that. Like, I love you, but let's go play, something else together later. I'll go over, these are my homebrew rules that I'm including. Such as, if you want to use crit fails and successes on non-combat stuff, and how is that handled? I go over how are conflicts at the table, like between the party and stuff like that, addressed. How are stuff like if they have an issue with my ruling, if it's something that can be resolved pretty quickly, like, hey, I don't think that ruling was right because of this, I'll allow that discussion. And then if it's something that's going to go on longer, I'll say, talk to me about this after, we'll circle back to it. And I always try to keep another person at the table who knows the rules really well, or if it's something mechanical, I can be like, I'm not sure on the ruling of that, and I'll ask the other person, hey, do you know what this rule is? Never be too proud as a DM to admit when a ruling you've made is wrong. And then I address, if it's something that comes up, I will not personally go and like retcon stuff that has happened. I'll say, okay, I've looked it up, I've looked into it, this will be the ruling going forward. Because I don't want to take away from what the players have already done. Another thing that I think is important to bring up is is romance allowed at your table? Are the players comfortable with romance? How is that handled? Because I do play with groups that like a lot of, romance, both, oh, I want to romance an NPC, or hey, our characters want to have, a little bit of romance together. So my rule is don't let it interfere with the, if it's the party goals as a whole or your romance, we're going to focus on the party goals as a whole. And then everything is fade to black. Yeah, you can romance them. I don't want visceral descriptions of that at the table. And then, do you allow PvP? Personally, I allow PvP in situations where it's like, oh, we've set up a predetermined like tournament they want to do or something like that. If it's, or if there's, oh, the two characters got into kind of a heated discussion, one takes a swing at the other, that's allowed, but then it's not allowed to go further than that. Nothing where you could permanently hurt one of your party members. And then depending on the campaign, I might bring up stuff like, for example, I'm running Radiant Citadel with my new group. And so one of the things I emphasized is, hey, these places are based on real world cultures. Be respectful of that. Be respectful of the cultures that, and don't, stereotype and stuff like that, because you wouldn't want other people to disrespect you and the culture you come from, which all my players I have right now are great about that. And then I tell them what I expect from them. Like I said before, I expect basic backstory and a goal. I can help them flesh it out. And I also have a requirement that they have to have a reason for working with the party. Because that will avoid, as long as everybody's working in good faith, well, I'm going to go and screw up this party goal because that's what my character would do. Like, if your character is going to work against the party, for the most part, don't play that character. Play a different one. But that's all I have on that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So that brings us to our next part here. So, conflict resolution. I've yet to see a game where there wasn't any sort of conflict. What we want to, basically our biggest points for dealing with conflict resolution is hear them to understand them, putting your foot down, and understand that you are the final say guiding your players. Well, Stephen or Annie, which one of you would like to go first?
Guess I'll go. All right. So it really depends on the context and what the problem is exactly. If it's a mechanical problem, like within like the game's rules or whatnot, then as Annie said, then like it's, you can, based on like what you're fine with. So moving forward, just finalize the rule. That's it. Move on. If there's something like, the player wants to do like a specific character, then I'll adapt rules such and such. One of the major problems that I think I've run into a couple of times is that like when a player is like immature and doesn't understand that like a player, like I give rewards based on like how hard, like how like more so for like people who want to actually play the game kind of thing. I'm not going to just give out things for free just because that they want it kind of thing. You have to earn it, right? So I've had players where it's like, I don't like how this player decided to like or not decided got this really cool magical weapon and it does all these things, and I'm like, yeah, they worked 12 sessions for that kind of thing. They've what is it, done the work for it, and they've researched, and they've gone through all these hoops. I'm like, yeah, sure, you've done all this work. Here, you deserve this. Take it. And then I've, where it's like, well, the immature player would be, complaining about the things that they should have gotten, or that my ruling is unfair or whatnot. And I just tell them that either contribute to the party themselves, or you do the same amount of work you do, or I have to cut you off. I'm not gonna like, just give you things for free just because you think that you deserve them. It would be absolutely insane. Another problem that I run into would be player killers who constantly want to just like fight, like think if it's more like a competition than it is like a team effort, and then they think they can get through the game by themselves. So they'll attempt to, well, I guess this delves into like a few different types of people, one of which Eddie expressed earlier about like playing an evil character. So if the player goes ahead and tries to antagonize the other players, or tries to like do things to kill their character, if they did not agree on this prior, and it's just like a problem, then I just immediately remove the other person. That I consider that bullying, and you can get out, and I don't want you back. It's that simple. I don't, if it's by accident, then like by all means, please just express your problems and like tell me, like keep me up to date on what's going on here and like what's happening. Like the kind of thing where it's like two people who know each other or two people who are friends, right? It's completely different context. If another thing where it's like, as difficult as it may be to have someone who plays the opposite alignment as the other players, I would still want to find a way to like have that evil character be able to like win. Maybe they can work with me, and I will tell them some things to like, if they're working their way to become like a villain, I'll give them henchmen, and then like we can like, I don't mean as in like assuming this is of course assuming that other players agree, where it's like, all right, so you get to play your evil character, and it becomes kind of like a monster of a week kind of thing, where like, oh, in this episode where the bad guy decides to like uproot the town of like not uproot decides to like have some kind of like crazy scheme to like steal people's money, kind of like a either played for laughs, kind of like a Team Rocket thing from like the original Pokemon, where like they're never taken seriously, or if they want to actually be a serious villain, then it'd be things like from abducting people and kidnapping people and stuff and whatnot. I won't get into detail. I'm sure you have your own imagination. So I'll find ways to like help them out in that kind of thing. But if the players actually, if one player or whatnot are being physically or verbally abusive, you better have good reason, or I'm kicking you out. I mean, like, granted, it could be stress, right? Like, again, we're human, and like sometimes people like yell at each other to get rid of their stress. So I'll tell them to sub out for a few sessions or something, and then we could do like a one-on-one session to catch up or whatever. But like, I don't want to cut up. I do it because I have to.
Back when I was a more inexperienced player and didn't realize you could bring up certain things to your DM that, hey, I'm not okay with this. My DM made me cry because he got really into like role playing something, and he yelled at me, and I just started crying, and he was just like, dude, because it was like the NPC was yelling at my character, but I like started crying because I'm just like, it was totally a raised voice kind of visceral reaction. So now, but that's a good thing too. If something like that comes up, it is okay to stop and be like, hey, we're going to take a break, we're going to talk this out. Your game should never come before your friendships. And I know some people will play with just random people and stuff, but I've had a couple of bad experiences with random, so I'll only play with my friends. And there's nothing that is more important than that friendship. I will stop a session if something comes up and she's like, hey, we need to sort this out. Everyone else can go get snacks or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah. If there's oh, that's right. If there's like a conflict, some kind of like problem where it's I learned that one thing to not do is to just like point fingers at people and just like assume things, right? But one of the specific things that stem from that would be to to address the problem to that player like isolated from the rest of the group. Just like if you're not sure, just inquire and just stay calm. It's very important to stay calm and just be like, just ask questions as needed. If you overstep boundaries, then like that's okay. I'm not saying the boundaries are flexible, it's just that like, you know, you're trying to figure out a problem, and you know, if done by accident, then you know, explain,
yes,
right?
and address the behavior, not the person too.
Yeah,
I found it's much better to say, hey, you know, I really didn't like this thing that happened versus you did this. Because if people come at you accusingly like you did this, it's just like, well, now I'm not going to want to talk it out. You're treating me like I'm a bad person.
Yeah, and if it's like a newer player and they're just like learning how the game goes, like they're not going to be able to do the same kind of nuances as like a more like skilled player can do, right? So sometimes it's just like, you know, a lack of experience, which if you have a new player at the table, you would already know that because you would have did the session 0 already, and everyone else would already know that as well, because ideally they would be at the session 0 too, hopefully. So
yeah. My new players, I always have them play at least one shot with the group too before we do a full campaign. And some of them it might be, okay, you know, you're still learning and stuff. I want you to play a few more one shots before I'll let you into one of my full campaigns, because you're still doing, you know, you're still in that stage of I'm figuring everything out and I'm going to be a chaotic little gremlin about it. I have one of those, and because he can't be there every week anyway, I've decided, okay, the weekends he can be there, we'll take a break from the main campaign. I'll run a one shot. And sometimes that's a lot better to handle because it's easier to let stuff go and let it roll off your back if, yeah, they're being a little disruptive and stuff, but it's just a one shot versus they're derailing this, you know, campaign that we're 20 sessions into because they're still acting like, people have said before, immature about things.
Well, I'm thinking another big thing as well is sometimes as a DM, you always have to be the bigger person, even if it's not your fault. Sometimes you have to address the player by saying, hey, I'm sorry things got out of hand. You know, we both had faults. That's, I think, one of the bigger things that most people overlook in a big campaign is saying sorry.
Yeah.
Some people are prideful. Some people don't want to admit fault. Sometimes as a bigger person, you have to say, hey, I'm sorry it went this way. And then get them to listen and understand as you explain the situation. Well, overall, we don't have a lot of time left. And I just want to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them if there's something you guys feel you want a little more clarification on. No questions? No questions, pizza? I think pizza's just attending. I don't think he's actually here.
Oh, good.
That is the meaning
Yes,
of life.
as I said before in my previous panel, the meaning of life is playing D&D with your friends so you can flirt with them.
Oh, you're at work, pizza?
Oh no.
That's awesome. Oh,
You say awesome or awful?
awesome. That's absolutely awesome. I'm gonna call him in.
Anybody else have questions?
Also, T-Berry had one.
Oh, Kithri. I absolutely love Kithri. She's the one I'm writing the book about. Kithri Winterstone, and her last name is an in-joke because my husband's character is Hayden Summergem, and Kithri did. I went in and had the like barest bones backstory, like, yeah, she was abandoned at the temple as a baby, and so she only knows her first name and was raised to be this paladin. And so whenever it came time to, the DM wanted to emphasize that the Thieves Guild was super powerful and new stuff that we might not even know, he included that, and he was just like, yeah, you're listed in there as, and he was trying to think of a last name, and one of the others worded out Winterstone. So that's how she became Kithri Winterstone.
I think one of my favorite characters are probably. Oh, let's see. Dominic actually has a question. So, as a new player, a new person trying to play D&D, is there a way I could do it online? What should I do to not ruin the campaign? What's a one-on-one and a session 0? Would one of you guys like to explain a one-on-one and a session 0 to Dominic quick? Got about 7 minutes.
I think
well,
Lore
for the
has the
one-
most experience with the one-on-ones, so.
I actually do. I probably do because I play a one-on-one game with my wife, where she plays her character, and I have to play as all the other characters, all of them. But basically, it's making the player the main character of their story, and trying to not only throw them for the loop, but also show what other key characters are doing outside of that story, and like looping the player into what those events are when they reach that point. And when that's one of the stories that I'm adapting to text is showing those scenes. For example, Libby is my wife's character. Libby's doing her own thing, working on controlling her new power, figuring out her identity, falling in love with the prince. Meanwhile, her bodyguard, childhood friend, and first crush, he's having to leave her behind to go investigate a major threat to the city. But their storylines converge. And so I have to loop her into all of that when they reunite. So basically it's just like it's player and DM in just one story. Where the DM just plays all the other characters. Session 0, that is when you sit down with your players and just figure out, what not to do in the game, what you can get away with, and boundaries. Talking about boundaries. And also so the players can find out what the other players are playing, so that there's not a whole lot of overlap. But even if there's overlap, if you make them quirky enough they can stand out. As for a way to do it online, if you there are multiple ways. There's Roll20, I believe they do random online sessions. If you have friends who are willing to play online, there's that. Yeah, and I think that's about all I can say. As far as how not to ruin a campaign. What was that, Ellie?
I was gonna say Reddit has subreddits dedicated to people looking for games. It can be a mixed bag, but I've had some success there.
Yeah, that is true. Like she said, it's a mixed bag, so take with a grain of salt. How not to ruin a campaign. Communication will probably be the best way to not ruin a campaign. Like, try to not just communicate with the DM, but with the other players, because one of the biggest conflicts I had in the voice chat was that one character that just joined was kind of very well, not kind of, but very chaotic, and he explained to me that his character's path was that he was going to slowly get more demented before coming back to the light. So I kind of wanted to keep that a surprise with the other players, and I should not have done that. I should have explained, hey, this is how he wants his character to go. I understand that there's going to be like character morals that are going to be opposite of what this guy's wanting to do with his character arc, but I don't want anybody to be offended. I should have done that with them. So I failed as a DM on that part. As a new player, yeah, just communication is the best thing you can do. And as a new player, to understand more D&D is to watch other people play.
Thank you there. We'll
I
probably
would
start
add,
wrapping- Oh, go ahead.
listen and be willing to change behavior as well as a new player. Because even everybody's going to mess up at some point. But if you do something and other people are just like, hey, this made us uncomfortable, or hey, please don't do that, just, okay, moving forward, I'm not going to do whatever.
Yeah, so we will probably start wrapping it up there. Our next panel will be won by one of our friendly people. I believe it was John the editor, and he is going to work on some character building workshop. So I want to appreciate everyone here for coming. Hopefully everyone was able to learn something. And again, this will be recorded so that way everyone will have access to it. But a big shout out to Ellie, the Lore Weaver, and Steve. Not Steven, Steve. And
What's up?
And if anyone has more questions, you can DM one of us.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or at least I should say you can DM me. The other two, I'm sure they don't seem like the type to be like, hey, don't talk to me, but I'm not going to speak for them.
I charge 15 cents per word. No, I'm kidding. I'm fucking. Yeah, you can DM me. It's fine.
all right.
I will do my best to respond to DMs.
Well, thank you all for coming. We'll hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.
Have a good day.
Thanks
Have a
for
good one.
having me.
Bye, guys.
Later.